Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Mem Zayin of Kiddushin. We are literally on the last two words of Mem Vav Amabet. The last two words are Amarava, and then we'll turn over to Mem Zayin Amud Aleph. It's a somewhat more complicated daf. We'll try and go through it carefully and slowly to make sure that we understand it, and then but it's again, it's a continuation of what we learned yesterday, and it is going to deal with some of the interesting issues in connection with Kiddushin. In particular, are you able to use a loan in order to marry a woman? Again, when we say that, we don't mean to make the loan, although that could be an interesting issue too, but the waiver of the loan. Meaning, I've loaned this woman $100, and now I tell her, listen, you don't have to pay me back. And in exchange for those funds, marry me. Right. It does not sound very romantic. That is for sure the case. So that's what we're talking about. That's what we will be talking about. But let's go back to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah had three statements. The first statement in our Mishnah was, if you say become mikudesh at me, if you say marry me essentially with this date, marry me with this date, marry me with this date. So I'm giving date after date to her, but in each case, I'm saying the words marry me. I'm saying, hareyat mikudesh at li. So in each of those situations, you need at least one of those dates to be worth a shava pruta. You will not aggregate the value of all of those dates together. So that's rule number one. Rule number two was, if I say to the woman, be mekudesh me with this date and this date and this date. Of course, I'm talking about the fruit when I say this date. If I continue on that process, then only if all of the dates are not worth a pruta will she not be married. If all of the dates in aggregate are worth a shava pruta, I have essentially aggregated in my statement that I am marrying her with everything, and therefore they will all, if they're all combined equal to a pruta, she's married. The Mishnah then had an interesting third statement that was unclear as to which of the first two statements it was modifying. The Mishnah said, if she eats them as they are given to her, then she is not married unless one date has the value of the shava pruta. Okay, has the value of a pruta. So the problem is that a statement on the last one, on the last of the comments, and we're saying that, okay, even though I say this date and this date and this date and this date, because she's eating them as they come, now we won't view them in aggregate, we'll view them individually. But the problem with that is that because I haven't finished my statement to her, it turns all of the dates before the last one into a loan. And so as a result, it doesn't work. Because she shouldn't be able to. Yes, it's fine that she can't aggregate, but it's not any of the dates that it need to be worth a pruta. Only the last date is worth a pruta, and that's what Rabbi Ami says. Rabbi Ami says that we focus just on the last date. That when it says that unless one of the dates has a shava pruta, we're referring to the last date. Rav and Shmuel don't like that approach. They say no, it's going on the first part. And although in the first part, we already said that if I say, marry me with this date, and marry me with this date, and marry me with this date, that of course all of the dates are taken individually, one might have thought, according to Rav and Shmuel, that if she eats the date immediately, and then she eats the next date immediately, she is on some level at trying to aggregate the hana, the benefit that she gets from all of these things. And so as a result, maybe in that situation, we should aggregate them. And so as a result, the Mishnah is telling us, no, we don't aggregate them. That machlokas between Rav and Shmuel on the one hand and Rabbi Ami on the second is going to be very important for us in today's daf. So that is why I wanted to make sure to go over it, because now the Gemara is going to quote a statement of Rava that introduces a new case, but which presumes Rabbi Ami's understanding of the final line, meaning that Rabbi Ami understands that the final line of our Mishnah modified the second line. So we were talking about this date and this date and this date, and that somehow when she ate one, she was eating them each time. So then you don't aggregate the value together. And so Rava says, so Amar Rava, we turn again right away to Mem Zayin Amud Aleph, Lo Shanu El de Amar La Bezu Bezu Bezu. That when we say this rule, that if she eats them, we're going to immediately, that they're going to be treated separately, is only if he continues talking. If with each date he says this one and this one and this one, then that's going to be the case. Because again, why is it that they're not aggregating? Because he hasn't finished speaking. But if he says Aval Amar La Be'elu, if he says to her, if I say to the woman, you're going to be marrying me with these, and then I start giving her one date and then another date and another date. So my act of giving is continuing, but my act of speaking is done. So then, then even if she eats them on an individual basis, when she's eating them on her own. And let's take a look at Rashi, aval be'elu, if you were to say with these, so mikabelas harishona lo bata liyada b'torat malva. The milva, that the loan to her has not, that the dates, the first dates that she received have not in fact come to her in the form of a loan, because I've finished speaking already. The mishenigmar hadibur, because once the speaking is done, hiknala b'toras Kiddushin, she is taking possession of them based on Kiddushin. Remember, we saw yesterday in the Tosos, where Tosos asks, I don't understand, because when she takes something, if I say to the woman, marry me in 30 days with this ring, so then we don't say that if the ring disappears, or if she sells the ring and uses the money for some other purpose, which wouldn't be very romantic, but if she were to do that, that somehow it turns into a loan. No, I've finished speaking. The effectuation might take place later, but since I've finished speaking already, it's clear that she's receiving it in the form of and she's agreed, and in the form of a marriage attempt. But if she starts eating the things while I'm still speaking, well then, no, I haven't finished speaking. She doesn't even know where I'm going with this. It's a little rude, but okay. Maybe I don't want to marry her after all. Maybe that's why she should limit it, that it only has to be worried. All right. So, but the point is, but once Mishin Nigmar Hadibur Hiknala b'Torah's Kiddushin, she's taking it over in Torah's Kiddushin. We're in the top of the narrow lines of Rashi, and we now go to the second of the lines of the narrow lines of Rashi. V'ki achla, and when she eats it, midida ka'achla, she's eating her own thing. And therefore, even if she eats each one, the first one at each time, mikudeshes, she'll still be married, as long as all of them in aggregate are equal to a shavapruta. So again, we've now differentiated, according to Rava, two cases. One, if I say to the woman, this one and this one and this one and this one, and each one she's eating as she gets them, then in the end, again, according to Rabbi Ami, we're going to say that only the last one is enough for her to marry, and it has to be worth a shavapruta, and all the other ones are considered like a loan. But if I say, marry me with these, and then I give one and one and one and one, and she does the exact same action, she eats each of them as she gets them, because I finished speaking, we're going to aggregate all of the value of the dates together. Okay. And Tanya Kavase de Rava. And we have a brisa that seems at least to support Rava, and indeed we'll say that it does support Rava. So what does it say? It's going to have three different statements. And we're going to have to analyze the statements, and then that will show that in fact we are supporting Rava. So Tanya Kavase de Rava, Hiskachi alone berimon be'egos. Marry me with this acorn, this pomegranate, and this nut. So, and now remember, the word, the vav in Hebrew usually means and, but it can also mean or. That's going to be an important thing to note. So we'll take a look at that in a moment. So Osha Amar La Hiskachi Li Be'ela, or if I say to the woman, marry me with these, Im yesh bekulan shavapruta mekudeshes. If they are all in aggregate worth a shavapruta, she's married. Be'im lav ein mekudeshes. And but if not, she's not married. But if I use the language of bezu, 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 this one and this one and this one, so then im yesh bekulam shavapruta mekudeshes. Then if all of them are worth a shavapruta, then she's married. Be'im lav ein mekudeshes. Then she's not married. Okay, so remember the first case is these. The second case is this and this and this. And then bezush natalatu bachalatu. But if I use the bezu method and she eats them as she gets them, bezu natalatu bachalatu, and then I say this one and she takes it and she eats it, v'od bezu, and we keep going on and on. Then one of them has to be worth a shavapruta. She's essentially disaggregated it. And again, as we saw, Rabbi Ami would understand this as saying that it's got to be the last one. And we'll note the fact that Rabbi Ami would say that in a moment. So now we go back and we analyze. Now, when we said that you are marrying with an acorn, a pomegranate, and a nut, what exactly are we talking about? If the implication was an or between them, well then, how could it be that they're aggregating? He says between them, so it cannot be that the meaning is or, because then you wouldn't have added them together. The elaba alone ube rimon ube egos. So what he must have meant is an and. So hainu bezu bezu bezu. What's the difference between that case and this one and this one and this one case? So elalav de amar la be'elu. So we must be that when you say three distinct items and apparently finish your list, well then that is like saying that marry me with these, because apparently what we're saying is that when you said ba'alon ubi rimon ubi egos, we mean that you say all of that before you're doing all the giving. So v'haba tani sefer, but 1 second, the end of our first line tells us osha amar la hiskachi li be'elu miklal dereisha la be'elu askinan. Well, 1 second. The end of that first statement in that brisa that we just quoted says not only if you do an acorn, a pomegranate, and a nut, but also if you do with these. In both of those cases, we're treated the same way. So if, in fact, an acorn, a nut, and a pomegranate is treated just like saying the words with these, what is our Mishnah telling us new by saying both statements? So Perushe Kamafarish. No, the Brisa is explaining the situation. The Brisa is telling us that actually when you say an acorn, a pomegranate, and a nut, it's as if you said with these. And that's what it's explaining. So Hiskachi li balom berimon be'egos ketzad. What is that like? Kagon to amar la hiskachi li be'elu. It's as if you said, "Marry me with these." The Katani Seifa. So now we go to proving that this is consistent with Rava's ruling, right? So from the end of this brisa, which we says bezuna talaso va'achalto, where we say that if she eats it when she takes each one, if I use the word bezu, well, only in the bezu case the bezu case do we say that we are going to disaggregate them if she eats them as she gets them. What's the implication? The implication is that if she eats them in the first case, the ilu bereisha, Lo kamachlig bein ocheles lemanachas. It doesn't make a difference whether she eats them on an individual level as she gets them or not. We're going to treat them as an aggregate group, and we can value it as an aggregate group when we determine whether or not it's worth a shava pruta. So shmamina koheka de amrla be'elu kika achla minasha ka'achla. That when you use the term with these, then it's as if she's eating it from her own. She's eating it as from her own, and so as a result, they all aggregate together, and she's married. So shmamina, actually, we've made a proof that this brisa is consistent with Rava's teaching. Now that we've said all that, now we're going to use this brisa to challenge Rav and Shmuel's approach to our Mishnah and say, I don't understand. We can understand how Rabbi Ami will understand this brisa, but we're not going to be able to understand how Rav and Shmuel understand it. Because remember, in this brisa, there was no situation where the man said, "Marry me with this, marry me with this, marry me with this." And in our Mishnah, that was how Rav and Shmuel applied the language of that if she eats each one as she gets it, that it would apply in that situation. So so it makes sense according to Rabbi Ami, who says that we go on the end of the Mishnah, on the second clause of the Mishnah, on the umay achi ba'achas mehen shavapruta. What does it mean when we say in the brisa, unless one of the dates is worth a pruta? It means the last one, because all of the other ones will be considered like a loan, so they won't work. So it must be the last one. So hakinami here too. But el Rabu Shmuel to Amri Tarbayo Areshikai. They're the ones who say that that in this third statement in our Mishnah went on the beginning of line of our Mishnah, the ochelas itzrichala, and they needed it in order to teach us that even if she eats it, we're going to view each date on its own. But hacha kilale kachashiv prate lo kachashiv. But in all of our situations in this brisa, they were all situations where if she left them alone, you would aggregate them. There was no situation where if you left them alone, they would be treated individually. So how could they understand this line in this brisa as referring to a situation where the person said, marry me with this one, marry me with this one, marry me with this one? It explicitly says in the brisa that we're talking about the situation where it says with this, with this, with this. So it just doesn't fit. So Hamani, so now this is going to be a little confusing. So who is it? Hamani, who is this last piece of the brisa? Rebbe to Amar Loshna Kazayas Kazayas, Beloshna Kazayas U Kazayas. Actually, it is Rebbe, because in a different context, I'll tell you the context in a moment and give you the examples. I have it in the note on the screen. In a different context, Rebbe says, I don't care how you say something. Whether you say this one and this one and this one, we're going to treat it as three separate things, and each one gets its own individual importance in its own order. Or if you say this one, this one, this one. Now, of course, in the latter case, it makes more sense because I haven't connected them with the word and. They should be treated individually. But Rebbe says it doesn't make a difference. So where is it that Rebbe makes that statement? It is in the context of something called pigul. Pigul is where you have the intention, where a Kohen or the bringer of the korban has the intention to eat the korban. Remember, it's just the intention. It's not that you actually did it. You had the intention to eat the korban at a time you're not allowed to eat it. So, for example, you bring a korban pesach. The korban pesach has to be eaten that night. And when you're bringing the korban pesach, you intend that you're going to eat it the next day. Makes a korban pesach puzzle. So, and called pigul. Now, pigul only applies if otherwise the korban would be a valid korban. There are other methods of thinking about a korban that will make a korban puzzle. So, for example, if you think that you're going to eat a korban outside of the domain in which you're allowed to eat the korban. So, for example, the more holy items have to be eaten within the Beit Hamikdash structure by the Kohanim. If they think I'm going to eat it at home, outside the Beit Hamikdash structure, then the korban is invalid. Now, what happens if I say that if I think to myself, I am going to eat it outside the right time and outside the right place? I've said both. Do we say that's one statement, and as a result, we're going to view the impact of that statement all at once? And because I've said the right place at the same time as I've said the right time, it's going to be puzzle already, or for a different reason, and therefore pigul will not apply? Or do we say, yeah, but even though you might have connected those with an and, you said the first statement before the second statement, at least in your mind. And so as a result, what Rebbe says is, even when you use the word and, we're going to evaluate each statement at that moment on its own. And so as a result, that's he would say that it would be pigul. And so applying that logic here, again, says, in this case, we're going to treat each statement on its own. And so Rav and Shmuel would explain that, in fact, the last statement of the Brisa would actually be according to Rebbe, even though the other statements of the Brisa would not be. Okay, so now that we've done that, the Gemara is going to next address marriage to the waiver of the loan. As I mentioned at the beginning of today, that's going to be our main topic today, and we touched on it yesterday, because remember, we said one of the problems with interpreting the Mishnah as the third statement of the Mishnah as being on the second statement of the Mishnah is that each of the items, because the man hasn't finished talking, each of the items that she eats, each of the dates that she eats, ends up being a loan to her. So, and we say that you can't marry with a loan. So Rav makes it explicit. Amar Rav hamakadosh b'milva eina mikudeshes. If you try to get married with a loan, then you are not married. Milva lehotza nitna, because a loan is meant for going, for using. It's meant for taking it out. It's meant for spending. So let's take a look at Rashi here. Two Rashis near second to last, second line in the widest lines of Rashi. So first, eina mikudeshes afilu yeshna be'en. Even if there's some money left over, so I give the woman $100 in $10 bills. So she's got 10 $10 bills. She goes out and she uses 50 of those dollars, but there's still $50 of the $10 bills that I gave her in her wallet. And so as a result, even so, Rashi is telling us, when Rav's statement is she's not married. So even though I could say those 5 $10 bills that you could just give me back right now and pay me back, I'm going to tell you, you do not need to pay me back. That's how I want to marry you. And the answer is, according to Rav, you're not married. Now, why not? Lahotza nidna, because it was meant to be spent. So halova, the borrower. So that's, take a look at the next Rashi again, second of the widest lines in Rashi. Halova rishai lahotzi abahotza. She's allowed to go out and spend it. Ve'eno chayev lahamida beiska shetehei mitzuya b'kol eight. She does not need to spend it on business opportunities in which the money remains liquid, so that she's able to access it at all times. And it's amazing that they had these concepts even back then. We actually have a real sense of what a liquid asset is and what an illiquid asset is. And the comment here is saying, you do not, when you borrow money from somebody, it's assumed you're going to use it on anything. Not that you're just going to use it on liquid assets such that you will be able to pay back. so that she is ba'enu the keva that the person should be able to claim it. The kevan de lahotza nitna, and since it was meant for her to actually spend, havi la kidida, it's as if the money belongs to her. Velo yahiv lamid, and it's as if at this moment when I waive the repayment, I have not given her anything. And so that is the problem. So as we continue, so Nema Ketanai. So this is a question, this question that we're going to have right now is also the question that we are going to begin tomorrow with. 1 second, maybe this statement is actually a debate among Tanaim. Because what do we have? We have a brisa that says the following. HaMekadesh b'milva eina mekudeshes. So if you marry a woman with a loan, she's not married. The Yesh Omrim Mikudeshes. And some say she is married. Wow, that's pretty explicit, pretty clear that it seems like that this position that Rav said is subject to a machlokas Tanayim. So my law, b'hai kamivli. This is exactly what they're arguing. Demar savar milva lahotza nitna, umar savar milva lav lahotza nitna. One says that a loan is meant to be spent, and one says that a loan's not meant to be spent. And when we say not meant to be spent, we obviously don't mean that the money is supposed to just sit there. The point would be is that the money is supposed to be used on assets that are liquid. We don't want you to waste presumably. I mean, it's not necessarily the case, but liquid assets are often more reliable in their valuation than illiquid assets. So this Hizbara, 1 second, but is that explanation actually reasonable that that's what this brisa is talking about? Because Ema Seifa, listen to what the rest of that brisa says. The Shavim b'mecher shezek kana. But both of the opinions agree that when it comes to a sale transaction, that the waiver of a loan is sufficient to effectuate a sale transaction. So, now, if you say that the debate is whether or not the money is given to be spent, but my cunning, if in fact you're going to tell me that the money was given to be spent, how in the world can the waiver of a loan effectuate a sale? It shouldn't be possible. So, Amar of Nachman, Huna Chavrin Mokimla B'mili Ochare. So, you're right. We have to reinterpret this brisa. The brisa that says that one who attempts to perform Kiddushin by forgiving a loan is not married, but some say she is married. We have to give a new interpretation. And Huna said that this case is really talking about a different situation. This is what we're talking about. It's where a man says to a woman, his kachili bimana, marry me with this $100. But when he gave it to her, nimsa mana chasar dinar, but he gave her actually $99. So now, effectively, that last dollar is like a loan, a money that he owes her. So Mar Savar Kisifa La Milsa Lemispe, that she's going to be embarrassed to ask for it, and therefore she's only going to ever get the $99, and therefore she's not married. That's going to be the Tanakama. Umar Savar Lo Kisifa La Milsa Lemispe. No, she wants this transaction to happen. She's not going to be embarrassed to ask for the $1 that's missing, and so as a result, she will make the claim, and that's why she will be married. She'll be married based on the loan of that $1. It's not the loan from him to her. It's effectively a reverse loan of from her to him, right? It's a loan where he basically obligates himself on this dollar. And again, just so that you know, a mana is equal to 100 dinars, so that's why I use the $100 and $99 example, and we'll see that in a moment. The Elaha, the Amar Rabbi Elazar. 1 second. We have a statement of Rabbi Elazar, Hiskachili b'mana v'nasan l'dinar, that if a man says to a woman, marry me with this $100, and then he only gives her $1, harezo mikudeshes v'yashlim. They're married, but he has an obligation, he has a debt to her that he needs to pay her off. Lema katanai amar l'shmaite. Well, 1 second. Shouldn't this statement of Rabbi Elazar be the machlokas in the brisa that we just quoted as understood by Huna? After all, in one situation, Rabbi Lazar says, I gave the woman, I say I'm going to give, in both situations, we say we're going to give the woman $100. In Rabbi Lazar's situation, he gives $1 and owes the rest, and they're considered married. And in the situation in our brisa, they gave $99, and there was a machlokas about whether or not the marriage actually takes effect. So won't that same machlokas apply when in both cases? Exactly. So we're going to say no. Amre, we can say maneh chasadiner ksifa la milsa lemispe. When you give $100, it's -1. When you give $99, and the woman's got to claim 1% of the rest, so then she might be embarrassed and feel like, oh my gosh, I got to be a picky about this. But he didn't give her what he said, and so as a result, they shouldn't be married. But maneh chaser tishim v'teisha, when you say you're going to give $100 and you give $1, so then lo ksifa la milsa lemitzbeh, then everybody will agree that there's not going to be any embarrassment, right? If I say to somebody that I'm going to, I'm going to take care of you, I'm going to make sure that you get X, Y, and Z, and I do 1% of the effort, they're going to come to me and say, listen, I thought you said you were going to do it. But if I come through 99% of the way, they probably won't say anything. And so as a result, that's the differentiation. And so as a result, even though Rebbe Lazar's statement looks similar to how we were explaining this brisa, Rebbe Lazar does not have to be inconsistent with either opinion in that brisa. Okay, so now that we challenged about to say that Rav's position was actually one that was debated among Tanaim, now we're going to say that, hey, there's another brisa out there that completely disagrees with Rav. And of course, that would be a problem, although it's that we say Rav Tanu Polig, so he would be able to disagree, but it's still going to be an important question that he needs to struggle with. But we're going to see, of course, that in the end, the Mishnah the brisa that we're going to cite is not inconsistent with Rav. It's going to take a little bit of time, and that will be the rest of our daf, but we'll get there. So, Meisvei, now we're going to ask a question about from a following brisa. The brisa has 3 different statements. And now, again, according to Rav Nachman's explanation, the first brisa that we said is not an argument about Rav's statement, and so now we are ready to challenge Rav. So let's challenge Rav with the following: Ha'omer leisha hiskachi livipikadon sheyesh li milyadeh. I give a woman a prized possession of mine to watch, and then I say to her, that item that you're watching, marry me with it. So what happens? So v'halacha umatzato shenignav osha avad. But now she goes and she finds that, oh my gosh, it's been lost or stolen. Im nishtayer hemena shavapruta. If so, it's my we'll say it's my prize baseball card collection, and so one of the cards is left. And if that card is worth a shavapruta, because they didn't steal all of them, mikudeshes, then she's going to be married. V'im lav eina mikudesh, then she's not married, because basically the thing that I have of mine in her possession, when I give it to her, that's a new thing that she's acquiring. She is actually taking possession of something she doesn't own. Upa milva, when it comes to a loan, so again, same situation, same kind of situation. So I gave her a stack of $10 bills, and now even though not even a shavapruta was left, meaning she's used all 10 of the $10 bills I gave her. Mikudeshes, she's married. So wow, that's pretty clear that she's married with a loan, even if none of the money is left over. That's pretty clear that it disagrees with Rav, doesn't it? So, and now we have still a third statement. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Omer Mishum Rabbi Meir, Milva ke, as we turn to Mem Zion and Bet, Harehu kefikadon, that the loan is like a deposit, meaning that there has to be some of one of the $10 bills that I gave her originally has to be left. But the bottom line is, Ad kan lo pligi ela demar savar milva afal pi afal gav delo nishtayer himena shava pruta umar savar nishtayer himena shava pruta in the lo nishtayer himena shava pruta lo aval dekuli alma mekadesh b'milva mekudeshes. What everybody agrees with is that marrying with a loan works. The only question is does some of my original original cash that I gave her, does it still have to be in existence and in her hands? Or do we say, no, none of it needs to be in her hands? But both of those opinions agree that on some level, a marriage will take effect. So Amar Rava says, the Tizbara ha-misratzta. 1 second. You cannot read this brisa in its current method. All right, it's gotta be a mistake. So what is the mistake? Because take a look at the following. When we say, you may have been thinking to yourself, well, what kind of watcher is she? Because pikadons, watchers, have two different types. I could give you something and pay you to watch it, or I can give you something and you can watch it for free. The first is called a shomer sachar, a watcher who's paid, and the second one is a shomer chinam, a watcher for free. So, and they have different responsibilities. A shomer sachar is responsible basically if anything bad happens at all, and a shomer chinam is responsible if they were negligent. So, if she accepted responsibility for it, so hainu milva. Well, then, if something bad happens, it's as if it's a loan, and so as a result, there's no difference between the first case in this brisa and in the second case of the brisa. And and if she did not accept responsibility for the item, Adatani Seifa. Well, then, if you're going to tell me about a loan case at the end of our mission of this brisa, uva milva afal pisha loan ishtayre mena shava pruta mikudeshes niflog v'nisne b'dida. You could have learned the categories within the category of pikadon, meaning when we talked at the beginning, so we've confirmed it at the very beginning when I gave the woman this thing that I'm going to now say, my card collection, and now I'm not going to tell her that I'm going to marry her through my card collection, and now she's going to, and then she goes back and she checks the card collection, and there's only one card left. So that's a case of as she was a shomer chinam. So now when we have a second situation, we should say that the situation should be about a shomer sachar. Why not just change the facts? No, don't have me change it to a loan. Have me change it to the same card collection I've given her, but now I'm paying her to watch it. So she has full responsibility. So as a result, b'med dvarim amurim, Shalo kibla la'achrayas, abal kibla la'achrayas, avagav delon shtayr mena shava pruta mikudeshes. Why not just say that in the case where I gave it to her as a shomer chinam, so then there's got to be one card left. But if I gave it to her in the case of a shomer sachar, then even if there were no cards left, she would be married. But so why not just say it that way? So the fact is that we didn't say it that way because that is not the explanation of our brisa. So Ella Taritz Hachi. This is the way you got to correct it. So Uba Milva, when it comes to a loan, we're going to change the wording. Afal pi shenishtayr hemena shava pruta. So it's not, even though not of prota is left. Eina mikudeshes. So we're going to reverse both statements of the Tanakama. That the Tanakama in the brisa that we quoted said, right? So let's go back to the brisa. Tanakama in the brisa that we quoted said, if the man was marrying with her with a loan, then even if there was not a pruta, it should say not a pruta, left of the loan, she is married. So now we're going to change it to say, even if there was a pruta left of the loan, she is not married. So basically, the not has moved from was not a pruta to she is not married. And one can understand that kind of mistake can happen over time. So that's the kind of situation. So that's the explanation that Rava offers for this brisa. And Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Omer Mishum Rabbi Meir, Milva Harehu B'Kvadon. And Rabbi Shimon's statement stays the same. A loan is like a washed item, meaning that if there's a shava pruta left, then she's considered married. So, but my committee, what are these two opinions, the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, arguing about in this brisa as we have now redefined it according to Rabbah? So, Amar Rabbah explains, Ashkach Tinu l'Rabbanan bevei Rab Yatve Dikvakamre. I happened to be seeing, I found some rabbis that were sitting in the hall studying, and they said the following: B'milva b'rishus ba'alim l'chazora v'hu adin l'onasin kamifla. That what they're arguing about is the following: what happens if money is left over? If I give you the $100 to borrow, and you have not spent any of it. Okay, so I gave you the $100 to borrow, and you have it in a pile on your desk. I come to your home, go to your office, put it on your desk, and it sits there. But before you have a chance to spend it, there's something. Yes, you're a good point. So we'll start with I say, you know what, you haven't had a chance to spend it. I would like it back. Do I have a right to get it back? Meaning, do I have a right to retract the loan, even though I've already given it to you, or not? So Demar Savar Milva Bereshus Lova Kaima. So the first opinion is that the loan has not actually yet started, and so as a result, or actually, this is the Rabbi no, I'm sorry. This is the Tanakama. It was just lova kaima, that it's actually according to the Tanakama, the money is already in your hands. You are responsible for it. I do not have the right to retract it because I've already given it to you. And so therefore, v'hu adin l'onsin. So as a result, if you happen to have the window open and a ridiculous wind takes it and blows it out the window, and you'll never find that money, it's tough luck on you. That's an onus that you still owe me the money. However, Umar Savar, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, no, milva rishus ba'alim kaima. That money still belongs to the lender. And so as a result, if the lender wants to claim it back, he can claim it back. But with that ability to claim it back comes a liability, because v'hu adin la'onasin, that now if it blows out the window before you actually spent any of it, tough luck on me. So v'amina lahu. But I told them. So now this is Rabbah speaking to the two rabbis who were saying that this is the debate, right? And so, by the way, if this is the debate between the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar in this brisa, then now this debate effectively has nothing to do with whether or not we say that a loan is meant to be spent, because they both can agree that a loan is meant to be spent. And as a result, they both can agree that if the person has used even a moment of even a penny of the money, then it is no longer possible to marry. And the only disagreement, the only narrow disagreement, is if all of the money is left over. That's where Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, listen, because the lender has the ability to claim it all back, at that moment, he can still use it to marry the girl. And so that will not be inconsistent with Rav's statement at all, because Rav was talking about an ordinary situation where the money, at least beginning of the money, has already been used. And so in that situation, everybody would agree that as we've now redefined the positions, everybody would agree that the money cannot be used, a loan cannot be used to marry. So now again, Rabbah says to them, listen, you two rabbis wanted to say that the machlokas between the Tanakama and Rebbe Shimon ben Elazar was both on the ability of the lender to claim back, and by implication on the liability associated with an onus. But I'll tell you something. you could say that the machlokus is only about the ability for the lender to claim it back, and you could say that everybody agrees that the onus is still going to be on the borrower. So if, even though I might still have the ability to claim back the $100 because you haven't spent any of the 10 I gave you, Stan, but if the window is open and a ridiculous wind that never would be ever assumed to ever happen comes and blows it out the window, you will still be liable, which is good because I need that $100 back. So let's take a look and we'll see it inside. The aminalahu laonas in kule alma lo pligi. When it comes to an one situation, everybody agrees. Nobody disagrees is the literal language. Dibrishus lova kaimi, that it is in the possession of the borrower. And my taima lo gara mishela. It shouldn't be any worse than if I were to loan you something. Because mash'ela dehadra be'ina, when it comes to something that you borrow, like a shovel, and you have to return it intact, chayev ba'onusin, you are liable for anything that happens. Milva lo kol shekain, well then certainly if I give you the right to actually use something and not give me back the original item, but give me back a replacement item, then certainly you should be liable for anything that is that happens to it. Elahacha milver b'shus balim lechazara ikabenai. It is just an argument about whether or not, if the money is still in existence and has not been spent by the borrower at all, not one penny of it has been spent, well, then the question is, can the Tanaim will debate. The Tanakama will say that the loan cannot be reclaimed, and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar will say, yes, it can be reclaimed, and that's precisely why we'll allow the man to marry her with it. The Elaha de Amar Rav Huna. So 1 second, that which Rav Huna says, Hashoel Kordum Mechabero Bikabo Kanao Lo Bikabo Lo Kanao. Now, 1 second, we have another statement where it says, Rav Huna says that if you borrow a hatchet from somebody, if you use it to chop wood, well, then you've acquired it and now it's yours for the purposes of being responsible for it. Lo bikabo, lo kano. Then you have not chopped. If you haven't used it, you haven't chopped wood. So lema katanayam rush l'shmaite. Let's say that his statement is identical to the machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar now, because after all, he will say that, hey, the Tanakama says that as long as the money has not been used, you're liable, and Rav Huna will say like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, which is even if the money has not, as long as the money has not been used, the owner can claim it back, and therefore there's no liability associated with it. So no ad kan lo pligi ela b'milva. The whole argument, as far as the loan is concerned, is with respect to loaning of money. Delo hadrabina, because in that situation, you don't give back the precise coinage that you were given. Aval b'she'ela dehadrabina. But when you borrow a thing and you need to give back that thing, so then divrei hakol bikabo in lo bikabo lo kano. So when it comes to an item, so then once you chopped, well, then we're going to say, yes, you are liable. It's as if you've taken possession of it. When you have not, then you have not taken possession of it. So, all right. So we've now done two things. We have, again, the original statement of Rav, all the way back up here on the screen. The Rav said that one who attempts to perform a Kiddushin with a loan is not married because the loan is provided to be spent. And then we had an effort to try and say, well, maybe the Rav statement is a machlokas among Tanaim. And we said, no, Rav can be consistent with both of the Tanaim because those Tanaim are talking about a different case completely. And then we said, well, 1 second, we got another statement of Tanaim where it seems like Rav is in complete contradiction to them. And we said, no, we need to reread that brisa in any event. And that brisa is now talking about a different situation completely, or at least a situation where none of the money has been used at all. And so as a result, that could be a qualification and be consistent with Rav. And so now, well, Rav has survived both a challenge and an attempt to say his position is a subject of machlokas Tanaim, but we aren't done with this effort. The Gemara is now going to try again to say that Rav's position is a subject of a machlokas of Tanaim, but for that discussion, you'll need to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. So I didn't get close to the bottom, but really this discussion is going to go through into the tomorrow's daf, and so I figured this was a good place to pause. I wish everyone a Chag Kasher v'Sameach, a wonderful Sukkot, and look forward to continuing our learning. Next week will be, again, both on Zoom and in person the week after. So the week after Sukkot is finished, so not during Chol HaMoed, I will be in Korea, God willing. I will record the sessions for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday ahead of time. Keep an eye out, especially for the Friday session, because it may be a little bit of a different format, because I will be in Korea, which is a place where they very much love the Talmud and are very infatuated with it. And so I've been given an opportunity to teach a daf of Talmud to a conference. And I don't know how many people are going to show up to it, but I'm going to do the best that I can under the circumstances. And so that will hopefully be the daf that I will post. Hopefully I will be able to provide enough content that you will feel like you got the full daf, and I will provide enough breadth that they will feel that they have understood what learning a daf of Gemara is really like.
Yeah, Yashikov. Is there a Jewish community in Korea?
Very, very small, all visiting, not.
Yeah,
it's
one of the few places the diaspora never made it to.
No, agreed. And my guess is that in part it was because during and immediately before World War II, Korea was Japanese occupied it, and so as a result, you didn't want to go to the Japanese occupied location if you were trying to escape the Nazis. You wanted to go to Japan or to China. So anyway, so that would have been possibly part of the reason why that even during the escaping of the Nazis, when the effort to escape the Nazis, I don't think people were in Korea, but not that I'm aware of, at least.
Yashikah, Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and look forward to continuing our learning together next week.
Good Shabbos, I should